So this is going to be like a two-parter video. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So the first thing I'll talk about is kneeling before matches. Now, back in 2020, it was the height of the Black Lives Matter movement following the murder of African American George Floyd, and uh, and we the public saw sort of fallouts from that, and the result was what was that people started to take a knee, which we saw players do before football matches. Now, in years following that, players have stopped taking a knee as they saw that it was a fruitless action. But it's interesting to see that to this day, female footballers still take the knee before matches. And I found this really interesting that female players still do this. Like, I was watching Chelsea versus Crystal Palace recently, and before they kicked off, they took a knee for like a few seconds. And I was thinking to myself that why do they still take the knee? Like, but uh, I was also thinking to myself that maybe they still want to draw important issues that we need to talk about, like racism, sexism, or whatnot. Now, we all know what take a knee stood for, and some players like Wilfred Zaha, to mention, thought that taking a knee was just pointless as it didn't do anything. And thinking about it, it's just one of the reasons why players stop taking a knee. But the fact that female footballers still do this to this day is interesting. Like, what are they looking to achieve by doing this? Like, for me, I'm not sure, but I guess in the women's game, it's still important. But for me, I don't know. I don't know. But I guess that they are still trying to show solidarity. I've absolutely butchered that word, but there we go. Solidarity. There we go. With they try to show solidarity for something, I don't know. But this whole take the knee thing, it's really interesting because it's like women's football, that's the only time it actually happens. Although we did see players take the knee at the Qatar World Cup in 2022. Like, England players did this shortly before they kicked off against the USA. Now, looking back at that, for me, I guess it made sense. But for me, I just found it a bit tacky, really, especially given that the US players didn't take a knee. But what are your thoughts? Should players still take a knee? And what else can players do to ensure equality within the game? Now, this taking a knee exercise isn't just a thing in women's football, but in netball also. And it's really interesting that players take a knee in netball, considering the size of netball, because netball at the highest level, let's be honest, it's not a very big sport in England. But looking at players take the knee in netball and football, I'm sure for me it's their own way of drawing attention to a cause that still needs to be spoken about. But for me, that's just my 2 cents on the whole take a knee thing. Like, because it's been like five years now, and uh, and nobody's really talking about it anymore except me, who is talking about this again. But what are your thoughts? Should players still take the knee? If not, how else can they draw attention to social issues? I'd like to know what you think. Right, on to the second subject. Is watching women's football still worth it? Now, back in April, I was watching Chelsea play Crystal Palace. Chelsea were edging ever closer to the title, and Crystal Palace was staring down the barrel of relegation back to the second tier. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, Chelsea may win this game 3-4, 5-0. And lo and behold, they did win 4-0. And at the same time, Arsenal were playing Crystal Palace in top flight. So I thought to myself, I'm going to watch Arsenal versus Crystal Palace instead, because that game's more on a knife edge. And lo and behold, it was, as Arsenal drew that game 2-2, which got me thinking, like, is women's football really worth watching when you go into a game knowing which side is going to win? Like, thinking about it, I've been watching women's football for a long time now, and for me, this season is probably the worst yet, because we know the teams that are going to challenge for the league, and we know the team that's going to win the league, and then we know the team that's going to get relegated from the league. And I just think to myself, there's not really much to I don't know how to put it. Like, you can't really tell. Well, I suppose you can tell who's going to win, but the issue is that when it's a match like Chelsea versus Crystal Palace, what you want to do is decide which side is going to win, so which side is going to score more goals. Not saying that this side is going to win and they do win, because it leaves you shortchanged, and you just have an empty feeling inside of yourself. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess one of the major factors for this is big clubs buying into their women's teams. Like, over the last 10 years, we've seen the growth of Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United. But at the same time, we've also seen the likes of Tottenham Hotspur, West Ham, Brighton, and Crystal Palace all come into the fold. But it seems that the men's hierarchy of the women's teams has just said, okay, here's a women's team, and that's it. Like, for me, if we want to see games are on a knife edge rather than knowing who's going to win, then these owners need to do more with their women's sides, like keep funding them rather than just putting out a women's team just to appease people. Having followed women's football for nearly 20 years, I recall a time when Everton were up there, Birmingham City were up there, and in the WSL era, Liverpool won back-to-back titles. And I always think to myself, why weren't their successes capitalised on? But that's a story for another time, I guess. But going back to the main subject, is watching women's football worth it? I think, for me, this season in the WSL is probably the worst that I remember. Because looking at the relegation battle, we know we knew which side was going to get relegated, and that was Crystal Palace. And lo and behold, they did get relegated. Right, sticking with relegation though, honestly, look, I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's time that we see relegation playoffs in the Women's League, which I mentioned in another video. But also looking at the title race, we all knew Chelsea were going to win the league, and that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, is top flight football in this country just the worst in ever? I don't know, but specifically with women's football though, I think previous seasons have been worth watching, as it's been pretty competitive. Like last season, for instance, Chelsea and Man City were going head to head for the title on the last day last season, but this season there will be no such scenario, and that's because Chelsea have just been head and shoulders better than everyone else. But I want to leave it with you now. Is women's football worth watching? And when I mean women's football, I mean club football. And yeah, for me, the reason why I'm speaking about the WSL only is because I'm not really clued up about what the situation is in, say, La Liga or the Frauen Bundesliga or the Women's Serie A. So you guys are gonna have to like educate me on that. But for me, I'd like to think women's football is worth watching, but what the product is at the moment, I'm not so sure. But that's where I'm going to leave it with you now. Is women's football worth watching? Let us know what you think.